Abraham Lincoln was the 16th President of the United States, from March 4th, 1861 to April 15th, 1865. He had a unique appeal not only among US citizens but also in the eyes of foreigners, and he inspired generations of people after his death. Despite his humble origins, Lincoln was able to revolutionize his country in no more than 4 years due to his murder in 1865. But what did Lincoln do? To answer this question, we must first linger on the American history during the 19th century. Let's take a look at the political geography of the USA at that time. The country was unofficially divided into North and South. The North, liberalist and anti-slavery, and the South, where rich landowners used to exploit black slaves inside their fields. Furthermore, there were 2 major political parties, which emphasized the division between the ideological factions, the Whig Party and the Democratic Party. Although the Declaration of Independence of 1776 stated that all men are created equal, after no more than a century, the same people who escaped from the British domain to be free started taking advantage of other people to become richer. During Lincoln's presidency, the USA passed through one of its greatest moral and political crises, the American Civil War. In the South, 7 states out of 34 seceded from the country to form the Confederate States of America, while some other states joined in the Union. There were also 5 border states disputed between the 2 parties, where the war made the largest number of victims. Now, back to Lincoln. Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809 in Kentucky, and took his name from his grandfather. When he was 7, his family moved to Indiana, but 2 years later, Abraham lost his mother. After a second moving to Illinois, Lincoln had the opportunity to try many different jobs. During those years, he became a strong and skillful man. He was really tall and muscular, and he succeeded in many activities. Unlike his father and his stepmother, however, Abram chose not to keep going with his humble life. For this reason, in 1836, he started studying as a lawyer. Due to his poor financial situation, Lincoln was mostly self-educated, but he didn't lose his interest in reading and learning new things. His first steps in a political career happened during his election campaign for the Illinois General Assembly as a supporter of the Liberal Whig Party. In 1837, Lincoln relocated for the 4th time, this time to Springfield, Illinois. Just 5 years later, he began a thriving partnership with William Henry Herndon as a lawyer, and he finally started making lots of money. Thanks to his charisma, Lincoln enthralled many people, to such a point that during his lawsuits there always was a crowd ready to listen to him. When Lincoln's popularity had already grown up, he started speaking against the Mexican-American War. He hoped that this would have granted him a higher position inside the assembly, but it was not the case. Due to his flop, Lincoln was really frustrated. At the age of 40, Lincoln's political life seemed to be completely ended. After 5 years spent away from his career, the future president decided to start what would have been his path to the success, the war against slavery. In 1854, he founded the Republican Party, which was going to have a really long life, up to the present day. When I first read about this, I was quite confused at the beginning. What has the conservative and traditionalist Republican Party to do with an anti-slavery movement? Searching deeper inside the topic, I found out that the Democratic and the Republican Party, the 2 major factions since the end of the American Civil War, switched their roles during the last 100 years. This actually means that the Democratic Party was the one that refused to fight against the exploitation of American slaves, even if it did not actively encourage it. Anyway, Lincoln founded his own party, which would have replaced the Whig Party as the main opposer of the Democrats. This choice was given by the decision of Stephen Douglas, Democratic Senator of Illinois and a major future opponent of Lincoln, to reopen the state to slavery. This started a long series of 7 debates between the two men. The truth is that they shared some points of view, but their fundamental ideologies made them always fight each other. As he himself expected, Lincoln lost the 1860 elections against the too popular Douglas, but his electoral campaign made lots of people think that he might have been a good candidate for the next year's elections. Abraham started the propaganda on May 1860. As opposed to his three rivals Douglas, Breckinridge and Bell, all from the Democratic Party, Lincoln refused to give any speech. He decided instead to base his campaign on a door-to-door activity, relying on the enthusiasm of the Republican Party members and the division between the Democrats, who had to choose between the three leaders. As said, after Lincoln's election, the most radical states of the USA withdrew from the country and founded the Confederate States of America, choosing the Democratic Jefferson Davis as president. The war didn't start immediately. The president, in fact, tried for several weeks to calm down the increasing tension between the two parties and to reunite the states, even if he never compromised with the seceded countries. The drop that broke the camel's back came on April 12, 1861, when secessionist forces fired on the Union troops at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Lincoln had already been waiting too much time. He started acting firmly and strongly. He declared the martial law and suspended the mandate of habeas corpus. He said that his policy was to have no policy, which meant that he was willing to change idea at any time. As the president, he had a huge responsibility. He had to keep the Union solid, to keep the sympathies of the border states, and to prevent the war from becoming a global conflict. To do so, he assumed the absolute authority over the army, and he nearly turned the United States into a monarchy. As a good leader, Lincoln was able to admit his errors and to cooperate with some generals during his campaigns, such as Ulysses Grant in Mississippi, the best of his assistants. The president was sincerely devoted to the purpose of the emancipation of the slaves. However, he refrained from acting during his first years of presidency for several reasons. The Constitution stated that every single state would have established whether slavery was legal or not on their territory. He would have lost the favor of many states belonging to the Union, such as Kentucky. He was aware of the fact that the integration of 3.5 million African slaves in the society would have been almost impossible at the time. Lincoln preferred a really gradual process of integration. He started with the Confiscation Act of 1861, which authorized the confiscation of every slave of anybody who cooperated with the Confederation. In 1862, with the Second Confiscation Act, he set every confiscated slave to be free. It took more than a year to get to his final act, the Emancipation Proclamation of September 22, 1862, which affirmed the freedom of every slave inside the Union territory starting from January 1, 1863. Despite the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation made many Democrats upset, Lincoln was able to make it look like a way to weaken the enemies, by taking their slaves away. However, after the war, the slaves would have risked a re-enslavishment without any further precautions. For this reason, the president managed to ratify the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, which officially abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, apart from the punishment for a crime. This change finally put an end to the American black people's slavery, even if we have to wait for Martin Luther King to see the full integration of black people in the state's society. Last but not least, on November 19, 1863, Lincoln made a speech on the cemetery of a battlefield, named after the place where it took place, Gettysburg. The Gettysburg Address, a 271-word speech lasting 2 minutes, has been source of inspiration for many generations since then, and became the most quoted speech in American history. After being re-elected with a vast majority of 91% against the Democrat McClellan, Lincoln ruled for 1 more year, but he was murdered 1 month before the end of the war. While he and his wife were attending a play at Ford's Theatre, the well-known actor John Wilkes Booth crept up behind the president and fired at the back of his head, killing him. His murderer was killed by the United States Police 15 days later. Lincoln's funeral lasted 3 weeks. His body traveled by train for the whole country as a symbol of his success in reunifying it. Lincoln's head is also one of the 4 sculptures on Mount Rushmore made in 1927 in South Dakota. The states had lost an important leader when they most needed him, but they will always remember Abraham Lincoln as the man who was capable of keeping the America united during its worst period ever. Fourscore-and-7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here give their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot allow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from this honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.